people of the world, welcome to today's episode of Coffee Chats with Jax, soon to be the Unity Project. Today I want to talk to you guys about a book that I've been reading that my therapist recommended to me, and it is a complete and total game changer. I've been seeing this therapist for I think maybe 6 or 7 months now. She's just completely changing my life. You see, I've had some pretty shitty therapy experiences in the past, which I think I might have talked about before. After them, I thought that I was never going to go back to therapy again. But then I decided to give it another chance and go to this lady this year who is she specializes in trauma and she's certified in EMDR, and it has been completely changing my life. And one thing that I really love about going to her is I feel like the information and knowledge that she's been giving me about what trauma actually is and what happens in the brain and the body during trauma, it's giving me permission to feel the way that I am feeling. And that's important because until I'm able to give myself the permission to feel a certain way versus avoiding or disassociating or trying to numb out and pretend that's not a thing, is then I get to take the steps to move forward and to heal and to see what that process looks like. You see, I grew up under the impression that emotions were a bad thing and feeling was a bad thing, and being told to not be too sensitive or to not be too dramatic or being compared to other people in my family because they were too sensitive or too dramatic, so I shouldn't be, and there's no crying in baseball and all that stuff. And so later in my life, whenever I experienced some kind of pain or trauma, I was scared of being too emotional and too needy and too dramatic about it. Because of that, it's made me feel like I wanted to kind of minimize what I have experienced. And what's frustrating is that I tend to do that with people, but also with my therapist, and that's ridiculous because she's my therapist. And I say that's ridiculous, but it's not, because something she's been teaching me is that the neurology behind it, like the what happens in our brain when trauma happens, sometimes we don't really have control over it. I'm reading this book right now that she's telling me to read called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's all about what the body holds on to when a trauma happens, because we may logically know that what happened is not currently happening anymore. What happened maybe was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even if it was last week, but our body doesn't know that. Sometimes when something triggers us, something in our brain makes our body feel like it is stuck in trauma time. It's like frozen there and there's nothing that it can do about it. Like logically, my mind knows that it is 2019, I'm 24 years old, I live in Nashville, but my body might think that it's still 2017 when I was extremely depressed or extremely anxious, or when I was experiencing assault at 17. Like my body doesn't know yet because it's still in my body. You see, when trauma happens, the side of your brain that carries the logic, that side shuts off. Only the emotional side of your brain, which I could be wrong, but I believe the emotional side is the right side of your brain and the logic side is the left side of your brain. I'm gonna fact check this and let you know if I'm wrong later. The right side of your brain, where the emotion is, that is what lights up during trauma, and the logic side shuts off. And so the same thing happens when we're triggered for something. The easiest way to explain this is a veteran returning from war. Say a car backfires. Logically, they know that they're not in war anymore, but that triggers a trauma from when they were at war, so their body tenses up and they might like act out or hide or run or like the urge to fight or get mad. That's because when the trigger happens, the logic shuts off and the emotion is like at full speed. So I'm learning all this stuff about what trauma is and what it does to us, and it's giving me a different mindset on letting myself feel. To be like, if I feel triggered by something, I'm allowed to. It makes sense because science. It makes sense because facts. Like the thing that's cool about this book that I'm reading is it takes the emotion out of it, which emotion is an amazing thing, but for someone like me who is scared to feel the way I'm feeling because I don't want to be too emotional, it's really helpful to have this book full of logic and facts telling me the truth about what is happening in my body. And I like to nerd out about this kind of stuff, so I go all in and I want to read the whole thing and I get really invested. And so I highly recommend, if anyone out there watching my video is considering therapy or is going to a therapist or is trying to work through some different traumas in your life, highly recommend to read this book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's been a really big game changer. And it's showing me that sometimes, like how I used to think you're supposed to heal about stuff is to just, I guess what's called exposure therapy, to talk about it, like reliving your experience in such depth that you will work through it that way. But I'm learning that that is not always the case, that sometimes that can be more harmful than the original event. because what it's doing is it's putting your body back into the reliving. It's making your body go back into trauma time without keeping one foot in the present. It's getting you outside of your window of tolerance. And so your window of tolerance means being grounded, means being present. And when we get out of the window of tolerance, we either go into freeze mode or fight or flight mode. Freeze mode is when our body just freezes up and we get really sluggish, or sometimes we disassociate, sometimes we get really depressed. That could look like many different things. Or fight or flight mode, in the past for me, has been really anxious, really impulsive decisions, stuff like that. But being present means that you are here, you are aware, you know who you are, you know where you are okay. You are grounded in the now. You know that you are not in trauma time. The only real way to heal and process through stuff is if we stay present. Because if we get outside of our window, all that does is it re-traumatizes our brain. It re-puts those grooves in our head of thinking we can't trust people, or thinking everyone's gonna hurt you, or thinking a car backfire is really a bomb, like any of those things. So I just really want to encourage you that if you want to process and work through trauma, to really understand, to really do it with somebody, a therapist, a friend, someone who really understands the brain science behind it. And that might not be easy, but it's really worth it, because the stuff is real. And I'm trying really hard to work through mine, and it's been difficult but really exciting, because I feel like for the first time I'm giving myself permission to really go into the full depth of what's going on. And it's helping me really just learn how to trust my body. Because something that I have been working through a lot is trusting my own decisions and trusting my own instincts, because I feel like I normally have to go to someone else to get their approval or to get their opinion. I can't just make a decision because I want to make a decision. Or sometimes like I get confused on if the decisions I'm making or the things I'm feeling are like trauma responses or real responses. So I'm just learning a lot about that, you guys, and it's been really interesting. So thank you for watching this video. I highly encourage you to check out this book if you're into that kind of thing. If not, I'm sure I will be sharing plenty more regarding that. I am not even close to a little bit of an expert. Like, I feel like I shouldn't even use that word in this video, but I need to put that out there. I am learning. I am just sharing what I'm learning. I'm not claiming to know everything, and I'm learning, and I'm excited to share it with you. And I'm really excited about what's going on. And there's some more stuff I want to share in the later weeks to come, but thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in checking out my book, Finding Home, that's where I share my whole story, and I go really in depth about this stuff, about my history with mental health, things like depression, anxiety, eating disorder stuff, relationships, all that jazz. If you want to read my book, Finding Home, and get a copy, there's a link in the description box below. If you want to support me and get involved in what I'm doing and be a part of my team, my creative team, my sounding board, you can join my Patreon family for as little as $1 a month to help me continue doing what I'm doing for a living. You can do that by joining at patreon.com/JackieGTV. Link in the description box below as well. I love you guys. Let's keep this conversation going. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions, comments, any of the things. I love you, and I'll see you next week.